Hello, I'm Tom. Austin, Texas, has been my home for the past few years. The city exudes a relaxed vibe, boasting a vibrant music scene and delicious culinary offerings. I am employed at a technology firm located in the bustling center of the city. It's a solid position, covers the expenses, and the team is fantastic. I have been with the company for approximately 3 years, and to be honest, it has been quite stable. I suppose I'm fortunate. I put in long hours, yet by the day's end, I find satisfaction. At 30, I suppose one could say I'm managing quite well. The issue is, I haven't truly had the opportunity to contemplate anything beyond that. It's interesting how, one moment you're navigating your 20s, and then before you know it, you're in your 30s, and everything seems to accelerate. I am currently without a partner, lacking a girlfriend or a wife. I would love to have one, it's just that time always slips away from me. My work is my priority. And let me clarify, I truly enjoy my work. The organization treats me well, the compensation is appealing, and the tasks, generally speaking, hold my interest. However, the reality is that time is passing, and occasionally I find myself reflecting on the opportunities that may be slipping away. After a long day at work, I arrive home, pop open a cold beer, settle onto the couch, and mindlessly scroll through social media, passing the time before I retreat to bed to repeat the cycle once more tomorrow. My friends constantly suggest that I should venture out more and connect with new faces, but it's not as if I haven't made the effort. Finding the time is quite a challenge. Additionally, I suppose I have my preferences. I prefer not to compromise. That evening, after a grueling week of toil, I found myself at my desk, aimlessly scrolling through my phone. It was one of those nights when I found myself retreating from the world, not quite in the mood for company. The demands of work had left me feeling utterly exhausted, and I found myself without any plans for the weekend ahead. I thought I might explore one of those dating apps. Those are the ones that seem to be on everyone's lips. Honestly, I've never really been that into these apps. I've listened to the tales. Individuals connecting with eccentric characters, disappearing without a trace, all that jazz. However, I found myself experiencing a sense of restlessness. I thought, why not give it a try? Perhaps I would encounter someone, even if it was merely for a light exchange of words. I've been on my own for quite a while to let an app intimidate me. I downloaded it, created a quick profile, and began exploring. I had low expectations, merely seeking a distraction. While scrolling, I began to recognize profiles that felt somewhat familiar. Yet, it was only when I encountered one that completely halted my progress. There, on the screen, appeared an image of a woman I recognized intimately. It was Valencia. Indeed, the spouse of my superior, Mr. Edwards. I gazed at the screen for a moment, my thumb poised over the app, uncertain of my next move. Was this a form of humor? I wasn't entirely clear on how the app functioned, so, without giving it much thought, I inadvertently pressed the like button on her profile. I swiftly moved on, wishing to remain unseen. However, it was undeniably too late. Moments later, a notification appeared on my screen. I clicked it, anticipating a standard message from a stranger. However, it was not the case. It was Valencia. She had reached out to me with a message. "Oh, what a surprise to find you here. What a pleasant surprise to see you here." My heart raced with excitement. I found myself momentarily paralyzed, my gaze fixed on the screen. What on earth? What could possibly bring her to a dating app? And, even more crucially, what was the reason behind her messaging me? I found myself at a loss for what to do next. I simply couldn't reply. I found myself at a loss for words. What would happen if someone discovered it? What implications might this have for my role? Thoughts were swirling rapidly in my head. I took the one course of action that came to mind. I chose to overlook it. I chose to act as if it never occurred, like a nightmare from which I would eventually awaken. Yet, deep down, I understood that this was just the beginning. I powered off my phone and attempted to push it from my mind. I truly did. Yet, I sensed within me that this peculiar meeting would linger in my mind for quite some time. The following morning, I arose as I typically do. The identical pattern. Put on your clothes, have a swift breakfast, and make your way to the office. Last night didn't occupy my thoughts much. To be honest, I made an effort to avoid it. I had no desire to. Yet, it remained, quietly haunting the corners of my thoughts. The day at work unfolded as it typically does. I settled at my desk, responded to numerous emails, and participated in several meetings. The morning unfolded as it typically did. All appeared to be as it should. There are no indications, no warning signs. It was an ordinary day at the workplace. As noon approached, I eagerly anticipated a respite from the glow of my computer screen. The cafeteria buzzed with activity, yet everything felt perfectly normal. I picked up my meal and made my way to my favorite place by the windows, where I enjoy sitting and dining in tranquility. As I settled into my seat, my gaze fell upon her. Valencia. She stood by the counter, her gaze sweeping across the room. When our gazes intertwined, my heart fluttered unexpectedly. My palms began to sweat slightly. She had company. Though she was surrounded by colleagues, her gaze was elsewhere. Her gaze was fixed directly on me. It was one of those moments when silence envelopes you, despite the bustling world continuing its dance around you. She politely stepped away from her group and began making her way toward me. I made an effort to remain composed, yet beneath the surface, an instinct told me I understood precisely what this was all about. It was impossible for her to approach me out of the blue like this, unless she intended to discuss the events of the previous night. Uncertainty hung in the air, a delicate balance between worry and relief, as I steeled myself for the impending moment. As she approached my table, a smile graced her lips. Yet, it lacked the familiar warmth of a typical smile. It had an unmistakable uniqueness to it. Nearly aware. She remained standing, leaning in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hello, Tom." She spoke with a courteous tone, yet there was a subtle hint of something more beneath the surface. "Could we have a brief conversation?" I nodded, even as a churn of unease twisted in my stomach. "Of course, what's on your mind?" She surveyed the surroundings, ensuring that no one was watching, and then her gaze fixed on me. "I simply wanted to clarify a point," she started. Reflecting on last night, I sensed the breath escape from my chest. I understood the direction this was taking, but listening to her articulate it was something altogether different. I took a deep breath, striving to maintain my calm. "Listen, I truly hope you grasp this," she went on, her voice soft and almost inaudible. "What transpired and what you witnessed must remain confidential between us. I prefer to keep it to myself. Particularly not Edward." Her gaze locked onto mine, and for a fleeting moment, words escaped me. This felt like a dream. I responded without hesitation. "I would keep it to myself. I assure you." She appeared to find solace, but it was fleeting. "I'm glad to hear that," she said, her voice gentle yet resolute. "It's simply intricate, you see? I would be grateful if you could maintain confidentiality regarding this matter. It holds significance." I nodded once more, striving to maintain a steady tone. "I comprehend. No need to concern yourself with my well-being. This will remain our little secret." She smiled, yet it was a constrained smile, one that failed to illuminate her eyes. "Excellent. I'm pleased that I was able to place my trust in you." A lengthy silence enveloped us, and I sensed the gravity of her words lingering in the atmosphere. "Tom, I wanted to ensure we're on the same page," she said, her demeanor shifting to a more serious tone. "This is just between us, understood? It must remain a secret." "Absolutely, I understand." I spoke a bit more softly now. I was trying my hardest to avoid adding any more discomfort to the situation than there already was. "Your secret is safe with me. I assure you." She regarded me for a moment longer, as if attempting to discern the sincerity of my words. She was beyond reproach. This entire situation felt peculiar to me as well. Thank you, she finally replied, standing tall. I always knew I could rely on you. Let's simply move on and leave it in the past, shall we? Very well, I replied, mustering a smile. Yet, beneath the surface, an undeniable sense lingered that I had ventured further than I had ever planned. She started to walk away, but just before she did, she cast a fleeting look back at me. Oh, and Tom, no need to stress about it. All is well. Please keep that to yourself, all right? I nodded once more, my mind swirling. Absolutely. And with that, she walked away, leaving me there, feeling as though I had just entered into some unspoken agreement that I couldn't reverse. I completed my lunch quietly, the dialogue echoing in my mind. What on earth just occurred? How did I find myself in this situation? The remainder of the day passed in a haze. I found myself at a loss for thoughts. I was unable to share it with anyone, and it lingered in my mind, refusing to fade away. It was a secret thrust upon me, and now I found myself burdened with its weight. It had been a fortnight since that peculiar midday exchange with Valencia. I made every effort to move on from it. The day was filled with tasks, and I maintained my concentration, yet the memory of the events continued to hover in my mind. I had persuaded myself it was merely a fleeting setback, something that would soon pass. I had no anticipation for anything more to arise from it. However, one day, Valencia came to me once more. It was just after lunch, and there was a noticeable sense of urgency in her demeanor, this time. Tom, she murmured, her tone soft and wary. Could we have a brief conversation? I nodded, a weight settling in my chest. I was uncertain about what lay ahead. She motioned for me to come along, and we took a few steps away from the bustling office space. I wanted to ask you something, she said, glancing around to ensure no one was nearby to overhear. I would love to have a conversation with you beyond our professional setting. Perhaps during the weekend? It might be more advantageous for us to meet at a different location, rather than this one. My brow knitted together in perplexity. What was it that she desired this time? We had already gone over the secret, and I believed that was the conclusion of it. Nevertheless, she remained determined. All right, I agreed, even though an uneasy sensation was stirring in my stomach. At what time and in which location? She paused briefly, as if weighing the choice of whether to share her thoughts with me. A quaint cafe lies about an hour from here, nestled on the outskirts of town. The ambience is serene, with a pleasant lack of crowding, creating a welcoming vibe. I will see you there on Saturday evening. What do you think of that? I nodded with deliberation. I found myself uncertain about her intentions, yet I had already become ensnared in this peculiar little web. What impact would it have? At last, the day arrived, and it was a Saturday evening. I made my way to the cafe she had referred to. It was a serene spot at the outskirts of town, tucked away between two gas stations, slightly removed from the main thoroughfare. The establishment operated around the clock, allowing for a leisurely arrival without any urgency. It wasn't the sort of location frequented by many, but perhaps that was exactly why she had selected it, a secluded spot. Upon entering, she caught my eye immediately. She sat at a small table by the window, clad in a dark jacket, her demeanor suggesting she had been waiting for some time. As I entered, she rose and greeted me with a wave. Tom, over here, she called, and I waved back, feeling my stomach do flips. I made my way to her table, a sense of unease washing over me in the hushed, softly illuminated atmosphere. She flashed a smile my way, and as I took my seat, she placed an order for coffee for the both of us. The waitress approached, and Valencia was already swirling her cup, as though she had performed this ritual countless times before. She took a sip of her coffee, then set the cup down gently as she spoke. I want to begin by expressing my gratitude. I truly value your commitment and the promise you've upheld. You didn't share with anyone about the, incident that occurred. I nodded, even though confusion lingered within me. Absolutely, I assured you that it's just between us. She offered a faint, relieved smile, and I could tell she was truly appreciative. However, her tone changed, taking on a more serious note. "You know, Tom," she began, leaning in slightly. "I've given this considerable thought, and I want you to know that my trust in you is genuine. If I didn't feel this way, I wouldn't be here with you. I've been with Edward for more than 25 years, and from the outside, everything appears to be just fine, doesn't it? We thrive, enjoying a fulfilling life. However, the reality is that it isn't as flawless as it appears. I found it quite unexpected. I had always believed that Valencia and Edward shared a wonderful marriage. Both achieved success, and he enjoyed a positive reputation among his colleagues. I never noticed any indication that there was an issue between them. However, she went on, her tone becoming gentler, Edward is quite a challenging person to share a life with. It's not limited to the workplace, it extends to the home as well. He exerts control, sets high demands, and it feels as though my efforts never meet his standards. There's something about him that makes me feel diminished, as if he's constantly working to undermine my confidence. I was in disbelief. For all this time, I believed their marriage to be one of the most resilient. They were the dynamic duo, the ones everyone looked up to. However, upon receiving this from Valencia, it felt as though everything began to change. She glanced at her coffee, then lifted her gaze to meet mine, her eyes probing my expression. "I'm not sure of my path, Tom," she murmured softly. "However, I found myself in need of a conversation with another person. I feel compelled to share the truth about the situation, and I believe you are someone I can confide in." I leaned back in my chair, absorbing her words. It felt like a dream. How did I end up in this situation? I had never envisioned that Valencia, the poised and graceful woman wed to Mr. Edwards, was grappling with such profound challenges. Yet, I was acutely aware that I couldn't abandon her at this moment. She was confiding in me about something significant, something delicate. And in the midst of the unusual situation, I found myself empathizing with her. I inhaled deeply and replied, "I was unaware. I truly would have never anticipated that. Yet, I stand before you, Valencia. I am all ears." She offered me a gentle smile. "I simply required someone to listen to me. That concludes everything. And I'm pleased it's you." I found myself uncertain about the direction of this dialogue, yet I sensed it was merely the start of an unfolding journey I wasn't prepared to embark on. It's something I can't ignore any longer. The evening drew to a close as Valencia and I stepped out of the cafe. We were both immersed in our own reflections. The dialogue felt peculiar, laden with topics neither of us anticipated addressing. She revealed more than I expected. As I escorted her to her car, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words, a quiet recognition of the moments we had shared. As we approached her car, I found myself on the brink of saying goodbye, my mind swirling with the weight of her revelations. Yet again, she caught me off guard. As I stood there, feeling a bit out of place, she leaned in and pressed her lips to my cheek. It was a brief, uncomplicated touch of lips, not the sort of kiss one might expect in a scenario like ours. It lacked fervor and sentiment. The gesture took me by surprise, though it wasn't inappropriate. I found myself uncertain about how to interpret it. Her gaze locked onto mine, a brief spark of an emotion I couldn't decipher. And then she remarked, "I appreciate your attention, Tom. I truly longed for someone to listen to me. Looking forward to our next meeting." I lingered for a moment, observing her departure, my mind still unraveling the kiss and the words exchanged. What did that signify? What did she anticipate from me? The sense that this situation was much more intricate than I initially understood lingered in my mind. The following week dragged on interminably. My thoughts wandered repeatedly to that evening, to her expressions, her revelations. The deeper I delved into it, the clearer it became that I couldn't simply dismiss it. There was an undeniable allure about her, a magnetic force that drew me closer, even in the face of the prudence I ought to have maintained. I found myself contemplating whether she was seeking something deeper than merely a chat. As the week drew to a close, it became impossible for me to overlook it any further. I felt the need to engage with her once more to grasp her true desires. The weight of this uncertainty became too much to bear. I resolved to take control of the situation myself. On a Wednesday afternoon, I caught sight of her. As I strolled back to my car, I noticed her by her vehicle, standing alone. She appeared to be deep in contemplation, initially oblivious to my presence. The moment felt just right, compelling me to approach her. "Valencia," I called, and she turned, her expression a mix of surprise and curiosity at my presence. "Tom," she exclaimed, her eyes growing a shade wider. "What brings you here?" "I need to talk to you," I said, attempting to keep my tone light, even as my heart raced in my chest. "It holds significance. Shall we arrange another meeting? I've been reflecting on our conversation from last week, and I believe we should discuss it further." She appeared somewhat surprised. It was clear she hadn't anticipated my approach, yet after a moment's hesitation, a gentle smile graced her lips. "It seems like it's been on your mind, hasn't it?" I nodded, a hint of embarrassment creeping in, yet I was convinced that this dialogue was essential. "Indeed, it seems there's a deeper layer to explore, a greater understanding to uncover. I'm not sure, but I feel we ought to get together once more." She paused briefly, her gaze examining me closely. At last, she let out a sigh and remarked, "Fine, I suppose we can continue our conversation. What do you think about the same location?" "The cafe, a Wednesday evening." I felt a wave of relief wash over me as she nodded in agreement. Indeed, it was the same location, at the same hour, where we shared our last courteous remarks. She appeared to withdraw slightly, her demeanor gentler than normal. She consented, yet I sensed a hint of confusion regarding my unexpected urgency. I felt the same way, truly, but I understood that I had to seek out the answers. As we exchanged our farewells, a blend of exhilaration and apprehension washed over me. Uncertainty loomed over me, yet one truth remained clear: she occupied my thoughts incessantly. Uncertainty loomed over me as I searched for clarity. I felt a pull towards the unknown, questioning whether I was ready for what lay ahead, yet the urge to discover the truth was undeniable. The evening air was chillier than I had anticipated as I entered the cafe, the familiar buzz of the atmosphere nearly overshadowed by the rapid beating of my heart. Uncertainty lingered in my mind, yet a deep desire for clarity drove me forward. The past week felt like an endless struggle, my mind entirely occupied by thoughts of Valencia. I was completely in the dark about her desires, her thoughts, and my place in all of it. I realized I could no longer maintain the facade that everything was fine. As I caught sight of her by the window, a curious blend of excitement and unease washed over me. She appeared unchanged, exuding confidence and composure, yet a subtle shift lingered in her eyes this evening. I approached her, and she greeted me with a gentle smile as I settled into my seat across from her. "Hello, Tom." She welcomed me, her tone soft yet cautious. "Hello." I responded, attempting to keep it light, yet my anxiety was starting to overwhelm me. I'd been reflecting deeply since our last conversation, contemplating everything. She nodded in recognition of my words, yet remained silent. She was anticipating my next words. I inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of unspoken thoughts that had been accumulating within me for days. "Valencia, I find myself lost in thoughts of you, unable to shake this feeling. My mind keeps circling back to the events that unfolded. I believe I'm developing feelings for you." Her eyes widened just a bit at my words. She blinked, a moment of silence lingering in the air, and I sensed that my words had caught her off guard. I didn't anticipate saying it either. "It has just been released." She reclined in her chair, her face a mask of mystery. "Tom, I get what you're going through," she said gently. "I truly do," yet I sensed my heart plummeting. "But," I inquired, my voice barely above a murmur. She paused briefly before speaking, but alas, or perhaps for the best, what transpired between us was merely a fleeting lapse in judgment. "I doubt anything will result from it." Her words struck me with the force of a blow to the stomach. Anticipating a rejection was one thing, but receiving it from her, especially after all we had experienced together, was an emotional weight I struggled to bear. I don't want to hurt you, Tom, she continued, her voice now softer. I haven't mentioned to Mr. Edwards what you shared with me, just as you haven't brought up the dating site to him. Her mention of the site took me by surprise, but I swiftly collected myself. What prompted you to mention that? I inquired, attempting to mask my astonishment. What is the relationship? She shrugged, her eyes drifting to her coffee for a moment, evading my gaze. At times, a profound sense of loneliness washes over me, she admitted, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. I simply sought a diversion, a means to occupy my hours, to experience a sense of connection, even if it was only for an evening. A knot formed in my stomach. But why not me? I inquired before I could hold back. Why didn't you simply reach out to me? What's the purpose of visiting a dating site? She glanced back up at me. Her gaze was unwavering, yet brimming with an emotion I couldn't fully identify. Tom, it's just that I can't fully trust you. Your employment with my husband presents an issue. Her words pierced through the air, leaving a coldness that seeped into my very core. Her words took me by surprise. Yet, we have engaged in conversation and exchanged thoughts. I hesitated, at a loss for words. Amidst the swirling chaos, I found myself yearning for clarity, yet each word only seemed to push the answers further into the shadows. I can't cross that line, she said, her voice resolute. Not with someone who is employed by my husband. It's simply too intricate. I nodded slowly, my thoughts swirling, while my heart felt heavier with every fleeting moment. Silence enveloped the moment, leaving no room for further words. We were both aware that it had ended before it truly began. Comprehend, I murmured, the words leaving a sour sensation on my palate. We lingered in quietude for a moment, each of us sidestepping the gravity of the words that had just passed between us. I was uncertain about how to conclude the conversation, or whether there was anything remaining to recover. At last, she rose to her feet, and I trailed behind her to the door. I'm sorry, Tom, she said again, her voice now gentle, as if she were attempting to cushion the impact. This feels impossible for me. With that, she turned and left. I lingered in that moment, observing her departure, sensing the void of something I never truly possessed. The conclusion felt elusive, devoid of any resolution or joy, leaving behind an inexplicable sense of emptiness. As I stepped out of the cafe that night, a profound realization washed over me, nothing would ever be the same again. A considerable amount of time has passed since the events unfolded. The days have merged into one another, and every morning greets me with that same lingering emptiness that refuses to fade. My mind is consumed with thoughts of what happened with Valencia, yet despite the countless times I revisit those moments, clarity eludes me. It feels as though there's an elusive element, a fragment of the whole that stubbornly resists fitting in, despite my relentless efforts to force it into place. She expressed her loneliness, sharing her need for someone to converse with, someone to forge a connection with. I understand that. At times, existence may seem lonely, despite being in the company of others. Yet, she was bound by marriage. She possessed her own existence, her own obligations. What's the point of joining a dating site at all? What prompts you to connect with me? Why allow matters to escalate to the point where we were conversing, revealing things we ought to have kept private, and crossing boundaries that neither of us should have approached? Was it merely a fleeting lapse, or did something deeper lie beneath? She appeared so confident in her emotions when we were together, as if there was something genuine between us. However, when the moment arrived and I finally expressed my feelings to her, she dismissed me. She insisted it was merely a brief instance, a momentary misstep, that there was nothing beyond that, and that nothing could ever arise from it. And yet, here I am, still contemplating it, still attempting to unravel the reasons behind what transpired. Could it have been me? Did I make a mistake? Did I completely misunderstand the situation from the beginning? Perhaps I was too forceful, or maybe I shouldn't have chased after her in the first place. I could have stepped back, maintained a professional demeanor. Yet, one must ponder, was it truly that straightforward? Was there a way to prevent this by simply turning my back from the start? I find myself pondering these questions repeatedly. The memory of her gaze lingers, as does the cadence of her voice when she addressed me. In her eyes, there was a glimmer, a hint that perhaps, just perhaps, there might have been something deeper between us. Ultimately, it only resulted in confusion and a profound feeling of loss. Did I misjudge the connection we shared? Perhaps I was merely a fleeting diversion for her, a transient remedy for the void she experienced. She stated it herself. Her trust in me was limited, as my employment was with her husband. However, that didn't deter her from contacting me initially. What was the true motivation behind all of this? Was she merely seeking a companion for conversation? Or was there a deeper desire within her? Was I merely a piece in her devious little scheme? Did I succumb to an illusion that was never destined to be? I recognize that I have my flaws. I recognize that I have erred, perhaps in my behavior and my reactions to certain situations. But was this truly what I earned? Did I really deserve to be entangled in this emotional turmoil? Or could it have been a misinterpretation from the very beginning? Perhaps I ought to have been more aware. Perhaps I should have recognized the signs sooner, understood that she was merely seeking an escape, and that I was never meant to solve her issues. Yet here I remain, surrounded by uncertainty and devoid of resolution. A profound void that lingers, refusing to be dismissed. And I ponder, am I the one at fault in this situation? Was I overly optimistic to believe that something could emerge from this? Did I act naively in believing she could share my feelings? Or was I merely ensnared by the notion of her? Perhaps I ought to have kept my distance from her from the very beginning. However, at this point, it has become too late. The harm has been inflicted. All that remains are these lingering questions without answers. Now, I pose a question to you, the audience: did I err in any way? Was I mistaken to even consider the possibility of something developing between us? Should I have simply turned away and left it all behind? Was it merely a blunder from the very start? Something that was never meant to occur? What alternative approaches could I have taken? Or was I merely another soul ensnared in a fate that was never intended for me? I lack the answers, and I doubt I ever will find them. It seems I must simply accept the uncertainty that comes with the questions.